I always believed that money was like dirt, something that comes and goes. How much wealth one has or doesn't have is all a matter of fate. This is why I chose Sikandar. I felt that people from middle-class families are often the most sincere, and they don't deceive their wives or get involved in partnerships outside their marriages. They are deeply sensitive when it comes to their wives, and they can't stand the thought of seeing their wives with another man. There's a sense of jealousy that they carry with them. For me, it wasn't about the money. I valued sincerity more than anything else, which is why I chose sincerity over wealth. My parents tried to dissuade me. They said, "Don't marry someone who can't even fulfill your basic needs. You'll regret this decision for the rest of your life." But I assured them, we have many relatives who are very wealthy. Their wives are beautiful, yet they still cheat. These men have multiple women, one that's in the open and the others hidden away, with secret relationships that no one knows about. I would rather choose sincerity over money. Sure, I might regret my decision later, but I can adjust to a life where my basic needs are met. However, I could never tolerate the idea that my husband would have relationships with other women while I was right there beside him. How could I live with a man who would cheat on me and lie behind my back? This is why I asked my parents to accept Sikandar's proposal. Yes, he was from a middle-class family, but sincerity runs deep in his veins. People from middle-class families don't deceive their wives. They're not found attending late-night parties, nor do they frequent brothels. You might not believe me, but I trust him completely. We are going to make our love marriage a success, and I'm confident it will work out. You don't need to worry about it. And honestly, you don't have any other children besides me, so I will never have to worry about money. Whatever you have, it's all mine, and my husband will remain loyal to me. After many days of discussions with my parents, I finally asked Sikandar to bring his parents to ask for my hand in marriage. I truly believed he was sincere, but time soon proved that my parents were right. I've regretted that decision every day since. Soon after, Sikandar and I were married. We had hoped for a love marriage and everything went as we wanted. Sikandar was also my classmate, and we spent our last semester in university together. People would look at us with envy. Now, I felt proud of my decision, especially when I could confidently tell my parents that I had made the right choice. Seeing me happy, they also seemed content. But as time went on, things began to change. 2 years after our marriage, my mother-in-law's only wish was to become a grandmother. For the first 2 years, we chose not to have children. We wanted to enjoy our life together. However, Sikandar was the only son of his parents, and naturally, they had many wishes for him. Though I had initially agreed with the idea of waiting, now I was ready for children. I too wanted to experience motherhood and see Sikandar's parents' wishes fulfilled. As Sikandar's mother grew older, the pressure to provide them with grandchildren became more intense. Sikandar had always been a loving son, and now I could see his desire to please his parents. But what I didn't know was that this would lead to a series of challenges that I hadn't anticipated. The pressure to have children began to affect our relationship. Sikandar, though kind and loving, started showing signs of frustration. He had always been patient with me, but the growing expectation from his family to have children started putting a strain on him. He too wanted to make his parents happy, but he didn't want to rush me into something I wasn't ready for. At first, it was subtle. Sikandar would occasionally mention that his mother was waiting for us to have children. He would laugh it off, but I could sense the tension beneath his words. The first year of marriage was full of love and excitement, but as time passed, reality set in. The demands of family expectations weighed heavily on us both. Sikandar's mother had always been loving, but now her focus shifted entirely to grandchildren. No matter how much Sikandar tried to explain that we were still figuring things out, she couldn't understand. To her, a son was a success only when he had children of his own. It was a tradition she couldn't let go of. I found myself in a difficult position. I loved Sikandar, and I wanted to fulfill his family's wishes. But the pressure was suffocating. Every visit to their home felt like a reminder of my inability to meet their expectations. I could see it in their eyes. Sikandar's mother, especially, looked at me with a mix of hope and concern. She would often say, "I hope you understand, dear. It's not about rushing you, but we're growing older, and we want to see our grandchildren before it's too late." The expectation, though coming from a place of love, felt overwhelming. I wanted to make Sikandar's parents happy, but I also wanted to take things at my own pace. Sikandar, being the loving husband he was, understood my hesitation, but also felt the pressure from his parents. It wasn't just about having children, it was about fulfilling a legacy that meant the world to his mother. Despite our best efforts, it didn't seem possible. The years passed, and after several visits to doctors, we were finally told that I could never have children. The realization hit me hard. The fear started creeping in. What if Sikandar left me? What if he found someone else to build a family with? I shared my fears with him, and to my surprise, his reaction was calm. He didn't seem disappointed or angry. Instead, he just shrugged and said, "It's okay. We can adopt a child from the orphanage." At first, I found comfort in his words, but deep inside, doubts began to form. I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, he would leave me one day for another woman. His mother, constantly pressing him for grandchildren, had started to add even more pressure. I began to wonder if he was only staying with me out of a sense of obligation. But through all my doubts and insecurities, he remained by my side. We decided to adopt a child from the orphanage. It felt like the right thing to do. We gave this child a home and began raising him like he was our own. It was a new chapter in our lives, and for a while I felt that things were finally complete. Sikandar had always been patient with me. Through everything, he had never shown any signs of being unhappy. We had built our life together, and it seemed that we were on the right path. Living with Sikandar taught me many things, but above all, it taught me the importance of respecting one's parents. I had never truly understood that before. There was a time when I would lose my temper and shout at my parents. It was a common thing in our society, even an accepted behavior. But Sikandar treated my parents with so much respect. It was like he worshipped them. Seeing him treat them with such reverence made me reflect on how I treated my own. His love and respect for his parents were beyond measure. I often thought that our children would grow up to be just like him, full of love and respect for their elders. Over the years, we adopted 2 more children from the orphanage. Sikandar's mother never suspected that they weren't our biological children. We kept it a secret, and our family continued to grow. No one knew the truth, not even our closest relatives. Our love for these children was pure, and it didn't matter whether they were biologically ours or not. We were their parents, and they were our children. But as time passed, something started to shift. Our children were growing older, and they began noticing things. They started asking questions. They would ask me why their father came home late at night, or why he wasn't home during the day. They had even seen him with another woman in his car, and when they told me, I brushed it off. I convinced myself that it was just a misunderstanding. He must have been meeting someone for work, or perhaps it was a business-related matter. But deep inside, a seed of doubt began to grow. I had convinced myself that Sikandar was loyal, that he would never cheat on me. After all, we had been through so much together. 10 years of marriage, 3 children. Our life had seemed perfect. How could he betray me now? I tried to ignore the children's comments, dismissing them as things that any child would say. But deep inside, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The doubts were starting to consume me. Could it be that Sikandar had been hiding something from me all these years? Could he have been cheating on me all this time? The thoughts spiraled in my mind, and I knew I had to get to the truth. One evening, I called Sikandar's office directly instead of his mobile phone. I wanted to surprise him, but when I asked to speak to him, the receptionist told me he wasn't there. I assumed he must have stepped out, so I didn't think much of it. But the next day when I asked him about it, he said he had been at the office all day. Something didn't add up. This wasn't the first time I had called his office only to be told he wasn't there. Yet the next day he would insist he had been working. I started to feel uneasy. It seemed like he was hiding something from me. The tension between us grew. Every time I would call his office in the evening, I would be told that he wasn't there. Yet when I spoke to him the next morning, he would tell me he was in the office. Our conversations became tense, and we began arguing more frequently. Days would go by without us speaking, and the silence between us was suffocating. I kept my suspicions to myself, pretending everything was fine, but inside I was falling apart. The children's words echoed in my mind. They had seen Sikandar with another woman. Could it be true? Was my husband betraying me after all these years? I couldn't ignore the signs any longer. My fears were starting to become a reality, and I knew I had to get to the bottom of it. I decided to do something I had never done before. I would investigate on my own. I would find out what was really going on. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay. I had to know the truth, even if it hurt. The moment I noticed a lipstick stain on my husband's shirt, the suspicion inside me grew like a seed turning into a tree. I stared at the mark, knowing full well that I never wore red lipstick. In fact, I had never worn that color even on our wedding day. So whose lipstick was this? Whose mark was on his shirt? My mind started racing. It was the first time I questioned his loyalty. Could he be one of those men who, like so many in our society, frequented prostitutes? This was a common thing, especially in our social circles. As disturbing as it was the truth. I felt a pang of fear and guilt. I loved him, and yet doubts crept in. I needed answers. I called his office and asked, "Where is he?" The receptionist replied, "He's out with a friend right now." I asked her who the friend was, and her response shocked me. "He's with a new girl. They're always together." "I think you should keep an eye on your husband. There's been a lot of talk about him in the office lately." I was taken aback, my heart sinking. Was this really happening? Could Sikandar, the man I had trusted with my life, be betraying me? How could he, after all the love we had shared, after everything we had built together? The thought of him with someone else, especially someone so much younger than me, was unbearable. At that moment, I remembered my parents' warnings. They had always said that a man's true character is revealed when he's not under pressure, when he thinks no one is watching. And maybe, just maybe, I had been too caught up in the joy of motherhood, the love of our children, to notice the signs. The next day, I decided to visit his office. When I arrived, I could see the immediate change in his face. It was as if the color drained from him. He hadn't expected me to show up without any prior notice. Even worse, when I walked into his office, I saw a young woman sitting in his cabin. I immediately looked at her with suspicion. As soon as I made eye contact, she hurriedly got up and left. Sikandar seemed flustered. I asked him, "Who was that?" He quickly replied, "She's my secretary." I didn't press him for more details, but I could sense something wasn't right. The unease in his voice, the way he avoided my gaze. It was enough to make my doubts even stronger. That's when I decided to start investigating. I couldn't stand the thought of being deceived anymore. I hired a private investigator to follow him, and whenever he went anywhere, I would get a detailed report about his movements. I had never been this suspicious of him before. 10 years of marriage, and now I was questioning everything? I hated myself for doubting him, but I couldn't ignore the signs. One day I traced his phone number and found out he was at a hotel nearby with a woman. My heart raced as I made my way to the location. I checked into a room next to his and waited. Time seemed to drag on, and finally I decided to go and confront him. I knocked on the door, and when he opened it, he was wearing pajamas. His face froze in shock when he saw me standing there. It was like he had been caught off guard, and the realization that I knew everything hit him all at once. I walked into the room, and to my horror, I found a woman inside, dressed in revealing clothes. She quickly tried to cover herself with a blanket, but I was too furious to care. I grabbed her by the hair and pulled her up, demanding answers. She looked at me with wide eyes, shocked by my sudden appearance. For a moment, the room was silent, and then I heard my husband's voice. He stepped in between us, trying to break us apart. "Enough!" he shouted. "Stop fighting, both of you! What is this? Sabina, what are you doing here?" He was still in denial, even though the evidence was right in front of him. His face was filled with shame, but there was no apology, no remorse. I couldn't contain my anger anymore. "You think I wouldn't find out? You've been sneaking around and you thought I wouldn't notice? You're out here making a fool of me while I'm at home raising our children. You're a disgrace." The woman, still in shock, quickly dressed and ran out of the room. Sikandar didn't even try to stop her. I was still seething, my heart shattered by what I had discovered. Instead of apologizing, Sikandar glared at me, his eyes full of anger. He grabbed my arm and dragged me out of the room, pushing me into the car. He drove us home at top speed, but I couldn't bring myself to speak. What was there to say? My world had just crumbled around me, and the man I had trusted with everything was nothing more than a stranger now. The truth was right in front of me, but I didn't know how to handle it. We sat in silence as he drove. I couldn't understand how things had gone so wrong. We had built a life together, and yet here I was, sitting next to the man who had betrayed me. The question swirled in my mind. Why? Why had he done this to us? To our children? After our argument, the tension in the house was palpable. Our children, who had witnessed our fight, were frightened. I quickly turned to Ayan and asked him to take them to their room. "We'll handle our issues ourselves," I told him. "The kids shouldn't be affected by this." Sikandar, although visibly uncomfortable, agreed without saying a word. He understood that for the sake of the children, we needed to resolve our differences away from their innocent eyes. As soon as the children left, the fight intensified. Sikandar blamed me for everything, and I in turn blamed him. We were both so angry that we started throwing harsh words at each other, words that once would have been unthinkable in our relationship. Sikandar accused me of no longer caring about him. "You don't take care of yourself anymore, Sabina. You've become so absorbed in the children that you've stopped taking care of your husband." His words hit me like a slap in the face. "You're so concerned about the kids now, but you've completely forgotten about me. I feel like I'm invisible to you." The word invisible echoed in my mind, and for the first time, I felt truly unseen by the man I had spent years building a life with. I hadn't realized that my focus on our family, on raising our children, had caused this rift between us. It hurt to hear him say that, but I couldn't deny that it had been true. The truth was, I had neglected our relationship, thinking that love alone would hold us together. But now I saw that it wasn't enough. I hadn't realized that love needed constant care and attention. He then took things further. "You've become so close to the children that you've forgotten who I am. I've become a stranger to you," he continued. His words stung. "You've started treating me like I'm not even here. You've turned into a stranger, and I'm the one who's been ignored." That's when I retaliated. "And you? You think I don't know what's been going on? You've been seeing other women? How many times have I caught you sneaking around? Don't talk to me about love when you've been out with other women at night, while I'm sitting here waiting for you. You've been ignoring me too." The rift between us grew deeper. We started living in separate rooms, thinking that perhaps the distance would make him realize his mistake and come back to me. But he didn't. He continued his late-night absences, and I was left to nurse my wounds in silence. We had become like strangers living under the same roof, pretending that everything was okay. Months went by, and the distance between us only grew. I started questioning everything, our love, our marriage, and even myself. Was this my fault? Had I driven him away? Or had he always been this way, just waiting for the right moment to show his true colors? I realized that something had to change. I couldn't continue living like this. I had to make him feel the way I was feeling, betrayed, neglected, and hurt. If he could step outside our marriage, I could too. It wasn't the right thing to do, but in my state of mind, I convinced myself that it was the only way to get through to him. I began spending time with one of the employees I had hired to keep track of Sikandar. His name was Ahmed, and he knew everything that was going on in our house. He knew about my suspicions and my pain. I started going to parties with him, parties in clubs where men and women danced and mingled openly. I wore revealing clothes, things I never thought I would wear. But I wanted to make Sikandar feel the sting of jealousy. I wanted him to feel the way I did when I saw him with other women. When Sikandar found out about these parties, he was furious. He tried to control me, telling me to stop, but by then, it was too late. "You can't do this," he yelled at me. "This isn't you. You can't behave like this." His anger was obvious, but deep inside, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. Finally, he was feeling the same jealousy, the same anger that I had felt all these months. I wasn't just trying to hurt him, though. I wanted him to realize what he had done to me. But then something happened that I hadn't expected. Ahmed, my employee, took advantage of the situation. He knew I was using him to get back at Sikandar, but he crossed a line. He drugged me. The next thing I knew, I had crossed a line myself. I was with him in a way that went against everything I believed in. I had never imagined I would betray Sikandar in this way. I had never wanted to lose myself, but I had. I felt so lost, so ashamed of myself. I had become everything I feared, everything I had accused Sikandar of. I hated myself for what had happened, but a part of me also felt relief. Sikandar had been unfaithful to me for so long, and now I had done the same to him. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the way to solve our problems. I had allowed my hurt and anger to cloud my judgment, and now I had crossed a line I couldn't undo. Sikandar, once he found out about this, was furious. The guilt was unbearable. His anger was the only thing I could focus on. He stormed out of the house, but I stayed behind, unsure of what to do next. My mind was in chaos. I had never expected to reach this point in our marriage, but here I was, sitting with the broken pieces of my decisions. I had started to sink deeper into a web of my own making. At first, I thought playing the jealousy card would make Sikandar realize what he was doing to me, but I ended up getting trapped even further. The very same man I had trusted, the employee I hired to monitor Sikandar's every move, became my tormentor. He began blackmailing me with the videos I had recorded with him, taking advantage of my vulnerability. He knew that I was using him to make Sikandar jealous, but I never imagined it would turn into something so dangerous. He was like a bottomless pit. No matter how much I tried to fill it with money, it never seemed to satisfy him. Eventually, I had no choice but to file a complaint with the police. And just like that, he was arrested, sentenced to a long prison term. Looking back, I realized it was my own fault. I had given him the opportunity to get close to me in the first place. But the deeper issue lay in Sikandar's betrayal. He had not only ruined our relationship, but he had also tarnished my reputation. He had made me an object of scorn in society. However, in our society, this behavior wasn't as shocking as it should have been. Infidelity, even within marriage, was something people turned a blind eye to. I had grown to loathe this fact, but I found myself trapped in the same cycle. The very thing I despised became the thing I was a part of. But it wasn't just about revenge or anger anymore. It was about feeling something, anything, to fill the hollow space in my heart. The truth was, I was incredibly sensitive when it came to Sikandar. I knew that if I gave in to the temptation of another man's attention, it would only lead to a cycle of pain. I had seen how men in our society could justify their actions, thinking that as long as they didn't get caught, they were entitled to indulge in whatever they wanted. But I couldn't ignore the truth anymore. I had tried to suppress it, but the nagging doubts would always resurface. If I didn't do something soon, I risked losing everything. I made a decision. I had to confront Sikandar. I couldn't keep living in this state of confusion, pretending that everything was fine when it was clearly falling apart. I decided to surprise him on our wedding anniversary. I thought, maybe today would be different. Maybe today he would remember what we once had. Every year, we would spend the entire day together, celebrating the love we had for one another. But this year, everything had changed. I carefully got ready, dressed up for him, hoping to rekindle the connection that we had lost. I arrived at his office thinking I would surprise him with my love. But when I got there, the receptionist told me Sikandar wasn't in the office that day. He had gone to the farmhouse. I was taken aback, but I convinced myself that perhaps he had planned something special for us. A surprise for our anniversary. Maybe he was trying to make up for everything. So I decided to head to the farmhouse, convinced that this was where he had planned something meaningful. I thought to myself, despite everything, he couldn't forget that today was our wedding anniversary. But as I drove to the farmhouse, my heart began to pound. Was I doing the right thing? Was I ready to face whatever was waiting for me there? When I arrived at the farmhouse, I thought I would find Sikandar waiting for me with open arms. I thought he might be hoping for reconciliation too. But when I walked in, I saw a scene that shattered my world. Sikandar was with another woman. They were laughing, too comfortable with each other. She was younger than me, dressed in a way that made my blood boil. In that moment, everything inside me broke. The anger, the humiliation, the betrayal, all of it hit me at once. I didn't know what to say, what to feel. My eyes filled with tears, but I refused to let him see them. I had been deceived, hurt, and humiliated, but I wasn't going to let it show. I walked up to him, my voice trembling but firm, and asked, "Is this how you want to spend our anniversary? With another woman?" Sikandar's face went pale. He stammered, trying to explain himself, but I could see the guilt in his eyes. He couldn't deny it anymore. He had been caught. I wasn't just angry. I was heartbroken. This man, the one I had trusted, had betrayed me in the worst way possible. But instead of throwing myself at him in desperation, I walked away. I knew that if I didn't regain control of the situation, I would lose myself in the process. As I left the farmhouse, I realized I had two choices. I could leave him, walk away from the marriage that had become a source of constant pain, or I could stay and try to fix it. But staying wasn't going to be easy. Trust had been broken, and healing wouldn't come overnight. The most painful part was that Sikandar had lost respect for me. I knew I couldn't change the past, but I needed to figure out what I wanted for the future. I couldn't bear the thought of divorce. It terrified me. I loved him despite everything. But did he still love me? Did he even care anymore? These were the questions that haunted me as I drove back home, unsure of where I stood in this broken relationship. That night, after everything that had happened, I realized that my marriage had reached a turning point. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew that I couldn't live like this anymore. I had to decide if I was willing to forgive Sikandar, if we could rebuild the trust we had lost, or if I had to move on for my own sanity. The decision wasn't going to be easy, but I had to make it. I was determined not to get a divorce. I hated the women in my society who would walk out of their homes over the slightest issue and head straight back to their parents' house. It seemed like the easiest solution for them, but I wasn't like that. No matter how many times Sikandar had hurt me, I could never be like those women. My pride and self-respect wouldn't allow me to take that route. When I reached the farmhouse, I was stunned by the luxurious setup. The guards seemed flustered as they saw me approaching, and one of them, nervous, said, "Ma'am, you're here?" I asked, "Where is your boss? Where is Sikandar?" He hesitated before saying, "He's inside." As I turned to leave, the guard stopped me and with a cautious glance informed me that Sikandar came here every day with a different woman. My heart sank, but I kept my composure. "I know everything," I replied, with more control than I felt inside. I entered the farmhouse expecting to see Sikandar. He was sitting there waiting, seemingly calm. His face dropped when he saw me. "What are you doing here? Is everything okay?" he asked, clearly shocked. He must have thought I would react the same way I did before, like when I saw him with another woman. That time I confronted him immediately, but today I wasn't going to act out. I was here for a reason, and that reason was to save our marriage. Before I could sit down, the other woman entered. She looked at me in shock, as if she hadn't expected me to show up. She knew who I was, Sikandar's first wife, and I had caught her before, and we had fought. But this time, I wasn't going to let emotions control me. I calmly called her over and sat her down. I turned to both of them and said, "I love Sikandar deeply, and I have no intention of asking for a divorce. I know my husband has been unfaithful, but that's something he started, not me. In retaliation, I involved myself with someone, hoping it would make him feel the way I felt. But now I realize I've only made things worse." They both stared at me, confused as I continued. "I now understand that you both care for each other, and I can see that. I don't want our fights to affect our children's health and happiness. I want us to part ways peacefully, without ruining our family. But if you want to be together, I'm not going to stand in your way." The other woman looked at me and, after a long silence, said, "I will marry him, but only if you agree to divorce him. I can't share my life with another woman." The words hit me hard, but instead of reacting angrily, I turned to Sikandar. He was sitting there, looking at me, clearly ashamed. His gaze was filled with regret, and for the first time in a long time, I saw a flicker of the man I had fallen in love with. I looked at him and asked, "Is this what you want? Do you want to be with her?" The silence stretched between us. His face was pale, and I could see the internal struggle. He had always been my husband, the one who promised me that we would stay together no matter what. But had I lost him completely? Was he really ready to leave everything behind, including the family we had built together, for another woman? The tension between us escalated. The woman got up to leave, but before she could exit, Sikandar, in a sudden burst of anger, pushed her aside and slapped her. "You're nothing but a mistress," he spat, his voice cold. "How dare you think you can come between us? Sabina is my wife, and you're just someone I've been seeing for the past few weeks." His words stunned both of us, but in that moment, I saw the man I had loved return, at least a part of him. He was angry, but his anger wasn't directed at me. It was a raw, intense emotion that shocked even him. The other woman, shocked and humiliated, turned to me one last time and said, "Don't ever contact me again," and walked out, leaving us alone. Sikandar, still shaking with rage, turned to me. He was apologizing, pleading, asking for forgiveness. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I've made mistakes and I've hurt you, but I never stopped loving you. I don't want to lose you." I didn't know what to say. His apology, though long overdue, hit me hard. This wasn't just about our marriage anymore. It was about two people who had lost themselves, who had forgotten why they fell in love in the first place. We had both made mistakes, but I wasn't ready to give up yet. I looked at him and with a heavy heart said, "Let's not end this. Let's try again. Let's rebuild what we had." For the first time in months, we talked openly about everything. The pain, the betrayal, the miscommunication. We both agreed that we needed to make drastic changes. This wasn't just about forgiving each other. It was about rediscovering the love that had once brought us together. Months passed, and our relationship slowly began to heal. Sikandar, though embarrassed by his past mistakes, made an effort to show me how much he valued our family. We focused on our children and created an environment where love, respect, and trust could grow again. I had made the decision not to divorce, and in doing so, I chose to rebuild our lives together. Then, something miraculous happened. The doctors who had once told me that I could never have children were proven wrong. After all this heartache, after everything we had been through, we were blessed with our own child. It was as if life had given us a second chance, a reward for the struggle we had endured. We now had 4 beautiful children, and we loved them all equally. There was no distinction between our biological children and those we had adopted. Sikandar and I had learned the value of patience, understanding, and most importantly, forgiveness. Our love for each other grew stronger, and we became a family that supported one another, no matter what. Looking back, I realized that as women, we hold the power to create or destroy. We can choose to build our homes with love, or we can let them crumble. But in the end, it's our strength, resilience, and willingness to forgive that truly shape our futures. I had fought for my family, and in the end, I had won not just my husband's heart back, but the life we both deserved.